I don't know why I did the things I did." That haunting confession lingers as the music fades in. In 1971, America stood still as Cher exploded across the airwaves, transforming her into a pop goddess almost overnight. But behind that dazzling rise was a far more complicated story, one tangled in intense love affairs with some of Hollywood's most powerful names. From her seemingly perfect partnership with Sonny Bono to a bitter courtroom battle filled with accusations over control, money, and identity, the cracks beneath the spotlight began to show. Rumors swirled. Was Sonny truly controlling her finances, as the headlines claimed? Born Sherilyn Sarkeesian on the 20th of May, 1946, in El Centro, California, her beginnings were anything but glamorous. Raised in instability, with a father battling addiction and a mother chasing dreams in Los Angeles, Cher's childhood was marked by hardship, including moments of deep poverty and even time spent in an orphanage. Yet somehow, even in those uncertain years, a spark formed. She sang, performed, and imagined a future far bigger than her reality, quietly shaping the legend the world would one day see. Classmates would later say that even back then, she didn't seem like she belonged in an ordinary life. There was already something cinematic about her presence. From a lonely girl with an uncertain future, Cher began quietly rewriting her own story. At just 16, while others hesitated between school and dreams, she made a decision that changed everything. She walked away from both, leaving home, leaving security, and placed her entire future on one risky bet: Los Angeles. But Hollywood wasn't waiting for her. It was dazzling, yes, but unforgiving. With no money and no connections, she took whatever work she could find. Days were spent struggling through acting classes. Nights disappeared into the neon blur of sunset strip clubs. She learned quickly that opportunity in this city doesn't arrive. You chase it, hold on to it, and survive rejection after rejection. So she approached anyone who might open a door. Directors, producers, even strangers, with the right connections, not out of arrogance, but because she knew she had no safety net but herself. Then, in 1962, everything shifted. She met Sonny Bono, a man working under legendary producer Phil Spector. When Cher found herself with nowhere to go, she agreed to work as his housekeeper. What started as convenience slowly turned into something deeper: partnership, trust, and, eventually, love. More importantly, Sonny was the first person who truly saw her potential beyond the shadows of nightclub stages. Through Sonny, Cher met Phil Spector, and suddenly, the door she'd been chasing cracked open. She became a backup singer on major recordings like Be My Baby and You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'. It was a small role, almost invisible, but it placed her inside the world she had been reaching for. Hearing her own voice through studio speakers changed everything. It was no longer just a dream, it was within reach. Spector even produced her first solo single, Ringo, I Love You, released under the name Bonnie Jo Mason. It failed, but failure didn't stop her, it sharpened her. In 1964, she and Sonny married quietly in Tijuana, Mexico. On stage, Cher struggled with intense stage fright, often relying on Sonny for support. Ironically, that fear pulled him out from behind the scenes and onto the stage beside her, forming the partnership the world would soon recognize. They tried again under the name Caesar and Cleo, but success still didn't come. Yet each failure built something unseen. Then, in 1965, Cher released All I Really Want to Do, climbing to number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100. It wasn't just a hit, it was a turning point. Soon after, Caesar and Cleo became Sonny and Cher. And with that simple change, the door to an era-defining rise quietly opened. That same year, they recorded I Got You Babe, a duet that seemed simple at first glance, yet somehow captured the spirit of an entire generation. But what many don't realize is that its first wave of success didn't begin in America. On the advice of the Rolling Stones, Sonny and Cher took a risk and headed to England, believing that perhaps the world would understand them before their own country did. That gamble changed everything. On their very first night in London, they were thrown out of the Hilton Hotel for dressing too strangely. What could have been an embarrassment quickly turned into unexpected publicity. The press picked up the story, photographers rushed in, and almost overnight, they went from outsiders to sensations. London's exploding youth culture embraced them instantly. Their bold, androgynous style fit perfectly with the energy of the moment. They weren't just accepted, they became symbols of it. Then came the breakthrough. I Got You Babe climbed to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and even knocked the Beatles off the top of the UK charts. Suddenly, Sonny and Cher weren't just rising artists, they were a global phenomenon. Their influence went beyond music. Young fans began copying everything. Bell-bottoms, fur vests, mod suits, long straight hair. Cher's look became a cultural blueprint, replicated by teenagers on both sides of the Atlantic. When they returned to the United States, the excitement only intensified. Appearances on major shows like Hullabaloo and Shindig fueled a nationwide frenzy, followed by sold-out tours packed with fans dressed just like her long before cosplay was even a concept. Their album, Look at Us, climbed to #2 on the Billboard 200, held back only by the Beatles' help. In an era dominated by the British invasion and Motown, Sonny and Cher stood out as a rare force, capable of competing at the very top. Between 1965 and 1982, they placed 10 singles in the Billboard Top 40, including hits like The Beat Goes On and All I Ever Need Is You. By the end of 1967, they had sold over 40 million records worldwide, earning recognition as one of rock's most successful duos. And yet, Cher wasn't content to stay within that identity. Alongside the partnership, she began carving out her own path. With the release of The Sunny Side of Cher in 1966, Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down soared to #2 in the US, marking the beginning of a solo legacy that would only continue to grow. Albums like Cher and With Love, Cher revealed something deeper, a voice capable of shifting from dramatic, almost theatrical sorrow to sharp, modern pop. When You Better Sit Down, Kids broke into the top 10, it sent a clear message. Cher could stand on her own, but just as her independence began to emerge, the world around her was changing fast. By the late 1960s, the golden glow of Sonny and Cher started to fade. Their soft, melodic sound suddenly felt out of step in a new era dominated by Led Zeppelin, Cream, and Jefferson Airplane. The culture was getting louder, bolder, more rebellious, and Cher felt it. She later admitted she wanted to evolve with that energy, to explore something raw and different. Sonny didn't, and that creative divide quietly widened. As America moved through a wave of social and cultural revolution, their image, polished, traditional, controlled, began to feel disconnected. Attempts to reinvent themselves through film only made things worse. Good Times, 1967, failed to resonate. And Cher's own experimental album, Backstage, in 1968, with its Brazilian jazz influences and anti-war themes, also struggled commercially. By 1969, she was dropped by her label, and their partnership with Atco came to an end. Yet even in that collapse, something shifted. Given one more chance, Cher recorded 3614 Jackson Highway, this time free from Sonny's direction. For the first time, her music reflected her true taste. Soul, rock, something more authentic. It didn't sell well, but critics saw what the public missed, later calling it one of the strongest works of her career. Behind the scenes, their personal life was unraveling. Allegations of infidelity pushed their relationship to the edge, even as they tried to hold things together after the birth of their daughter, Chastity, later known as Chaz Bono. Desperate for a breakthrough, they took a huge risk, investing $500,000 of their own money into the film Chastity. It failed badly, leaving them in serious debt. But even failure had a hidden consequence. Critics began to notice something unexpected. Cher could act. And just as everything seemed to be falling apart, a new opportunity emerged in the most unlikely place: nightclubs. Their live performances, filled with sharp, often tense banter drawn from real frustrations, captivated audiences. What started as conflict became entertainment. And that tension caught the attention of television executives, quietly setting the stage for yet another reinvention. From the outside, it looked like a dream carefully crafted for the world to admire. The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour was pulling in nearly 30 million viewers each week, transforming them into the image of the perfect American couple, playful, stylish, and deeply in sync. Cher, with her striking presence and fearless fashion, wasn't just performing, she was defining an era. Sequins, bold silhouettes, and unapologetic confidence turned every appearance into a statement. At the same time, her solo music career surged forward with hits like Gypsies, Tramps and Thieves, Half-Breed, and Dark Lady. These weren't just chart toppers, they were declarations that Cher understood her artistry in a way no one else did. But behind the polished image, something far more complicated was unfolding. While audiences saw laughter and chemistry, the foundation of their relationship was quietly breaking apart. By the early 1970s, the tension between Sonny and Cher had reached a point where it could no longer be hidden. They continued to perform together, maintaining the illusion for the public, but offstage, the connection that once defined them had already fractured. In 1974, the truth finally surfaced. Sonny filed for separation, and what followed was not a quiet ending, but a very public and painful unraveling. Cher's response shocked many. She accused Sonny of controlling her career, her finances, and even her sense of independence. The courtroom battles that followed were not just about divorce. They were about identity, power, and ownership of a life that had been carefully shaped in the spotlight. Custody of their child became another layer in the conflict, turning a private struggle into a public spectacle. The image of the perfect couple dissolved completely, leaving behind something raw and unresolved. And yet, in a way that seemed almost contradictory, as her personal life fell apart, her career began to rise even higher. Cher stepped into a new phase one, where she was no longer defined as half of a duo. She launched her own television projects, earned major awards, and began to reshape her image as a solo force. It was no longer about Sonny and Cher. It was about Cher alone. But independence did not come with stability. The years that followed were marked by constant reinvention, and not every attempt succeeded. She moved through different musical styles, disco, rock, experimental sounds, searching for something that felt authentic. Some projects connected with audiences, while others failed to find their place. Critics questioned her direction, the media doubted her choices, and the industry seemed unsure of where she belonged. Her personal life mirrored that uncertainty. Relationships came and went, including a turbulent marriage to Gregg Allman that ended in divorce. Each chapter brought its own challenges, reinforcing the idea that Cher was living in a constant state of transition, never settled, never fully accepted in any single role. At times, it seemed like the world had already decided who she was, and anything outside that image was met with resistance. But Cher had never been someone who accepted limits. When music began to feel restrictive, she turned toward film once again, stepping into unfamiliar territory. The transition wasn't easy. Audiences initially struggled to see her as anything other than a pop icon. When her name appeared on screen, it was sometimes met with skepticism, even laughter. But Cher didn't retreat. She leaned in. With Silkwood, everything began to shift. Her performance revealed a depth that few had expected, earning her critical recognition and a Golden Globe. It wasn't just a successful role, it was a turning point. Suddenly, the narrative around her began to change. She wasn't just experimenting with acting, she was proving that she belonged. Then came Mask, a film that allowed her to explore emotional complexity in a way that resonated deeply with audiences and critics alike. Her performance earned international recognition, including honors at the Cannes Film Festival. By the time she reached the late 1980s, Cher had achieved something remarkable. She had transformed herself into a respected actress in an industry that had once dismissed her. The defining moment came with Moonstruck. In that role, Cher brought warmth, humor, and vulnerability to a character that felt both ordinary and unforgettable. Winning the Academy Award for Best Actress wasn't just a career milestone, it was a powerful statement. She had crossed a line that few believed she could, redefining how the world saw her. But even after reaching that level of success, Cher refused to remain in one place. She returned to music with renewed energy, embracing a stronger, more mature sound. Songs like If I Could Turn Back Time brought her back to the top of the charts, while her bold image continued to challenge expectations. Where others might have played it safe, Cher leaned into controversy, using it as a way to stay ahead of the culture rather than follow it. Then came one of the most emotional turning points in her life. In 1998, Sonny Bono, her former partner, and one of the most significant figures in her journey, died unexpectedly. Despite their complicated history, Cher chose to speak openly about their relationship, acknowledging both the pain and the connection they had shared. It was a moment of honesty that reminded the world their story had never been simple. And just when it seemed like her legacy was already complete, Cher delivered one of the most extraordinary comebacks in modern music history. Believe wasn't just a hit, it was a global phenomenon. The song topped charts around the world, becoming the biggest success of her career, and introducing her to an entirely new generation. At an age when many artists fade from relevance, Cher did the opposite. She redefined what longevity could look like. As the years moved forward, she continued to evolve. Massive tours, Las Vegas residencies, film appearances, and new creative projects kept her firmly in the spotlight. Even when health challenges and public scrutiny followed her, she never fully stepped away. There was always another chapter, another reinvention, another version of herself waiting to emerge. What makes Cher's story so compelling isn't just her success, it's her refusal to be defined by it. She never allowed a single identity to limit her. Singer, actress, fashion icon, cultural symbol, each role was only a part of something much larger. Every time the world tried to place her in a category, she moved beyond it. She faced failure, criticism, and personal loss, sometimes all at once. She was doubted, dismissed, and underestimated more than once. But each time, she responded not by retreating, but by transforming. Reinvention wasn't a strategy for her, it was survival. Through decades of change, both in her personal life and in the culture around her, Cher remained something rare. Not just relevant, but evolving. Not just successful, but resilient. Her journey wasn't defined by a single peak, but by a series of rises and falls that she navigated on her own terms. And that may be the most powerful part of her story. Not the fame, not the awards, not even the comebacks, but the pattern beneath it all. A woman who refused to stay the same. An artist who kept moving forward, even when the path was uncertain. A life that was never linear, but always in motion. Because in the end, Cher didn't just build a career, she built a legacy of reinvention.